Could have done without the microphone if it would have caused that much issues. Uh, but so bulky. All right, let me see.
Gotta get that other one fixed, man.
I know I gotta figure that one out. All right, how about now?
Say it one more time.
Check. You hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
no,
Oh, I
no.
was gonna say it's still
There you go. How about now?
there. It is.
Yeah.
There it is. Thanks for tuning in to Yappin and Shit, where we as brothers and friends hop on the mics and have conversations. Sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're not. Sometimes we react, and sometimes we just yap. We appreciate you tuning in and hope you enjoy the episode.
I mean, hey, man, that's just a culmination demonstration of our week and a half, right? We won't go into details, obviously, but yeah, it's just been tough week all around. But hopefully that just means others who are going through the same shit. Hopefully, it just means you know when we're this low, bigger and better things to come, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe it's one of those things where it's like, you know what, we're gonna hit you with some stuff at the end of the year, so you feel more inclined or whatever to make a resolution or
Yeah,
new year,
yeah,
new me kind of thing. I don't know. We've talked about that before, and we'll talk about it here in few weeks. Actually, it's pretty close.
yeah. I mean, we could give it a little preview. I mean, today's a relatively short week, or a newsless week, um,
Yeah,
for example. So we could kind of give that and um, see what we talk about today, and kind of to kind of debrief to kind of you know um offload kind of like the stresses and stuff that we went through in this week and a half and without having to go into detail and then see how it compares to um what it's like near the end of the year, right?
oh yeah. I mean, one would hope that it just goes up at this point,
Yeah,
but you never know. Life likes to throw curveballs at you.
yeah,
So that's just one of those things, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, hey, relatively slow news week, no more bananas being sold, and uh what better time to take advantage of this little moment just to catch up and let's have a little debrief and de-stress session. Hopefully others who are listening can kind of follow along and maybe shout into the void wherever you are, and let out what's been bothering you in the past couple weeks, past month, past year maybe,
Yeah.
um, and going from there.
Yeah, I know. Go yell at the clouds or whatever you got to do. Scream into the
Yeah,
abyss, like you said. Go throw
yeah,
a. I would say throw a rock at something.
yeah,
Preferably a field. Let's not try to aim things at people or items or
yeah,
cars or anything like that. But you know what I mean. Into a lake, maybe. I don't know.
yeah,
But then you're throwing things at maybe potential fish. Who knows? I don't know. Anyways,
yeah. I don't know. Maybe the physics of things will stop the rock from hitting them before it hits them. Hopefully, that's the hope.
true, true.
Yeah,
Or if you're having a really bad time, maybe that rock somehow flies right back at you. Who knows?
yeah,
That would
yeah,
be kind of crazy, but
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, life just happens, but it's how
oh
you
yeah.
deal with it, right? That
Hmm.
that kind of makes all the difference. And in some way or some form, right? There's baggage that we all carry, even if we don't talk about it or anything. But yeah, this last quarter of the year, this last maybe couple months for me too, things that I haven't even brought up, but just been tough overall in our lives. But you know, but the more you persevere, the more you kind of have a positive outlook. The things that it starts to look better and better. Um, so I'm hoping that kind of works out our favor too, especially when it comes close to the new year.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's one of those things too where, I think we've been around the block a couple times, you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
like, and I understand if you're going through it and you don't have a support system and anything like that, just know you're not alone, first of all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like there's always going to be someone who's dealing with something, and like I know a lot of people think that, people don't care,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So they have to resort to certain things, you know what I mean? So we're like, you feel alone and lonely, and even though you might have some people around you, you still have that feeling of being alone, um, and feel like you're the only person going through that thing, to where, you know, you sometimes take drastic measures and in all of that, to where, yeah, you're just kind of, I think loneliness is like the biggest thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And feeling like you're, I wouldn't say worthless, but that's definitely a feeling. People definitely go through it this time of year too. Winter just typically does that to a lot of people, especially like in
Yeah.
the Pacific Northwest. Just because it's kind of gloomy,
Yeah.
it's rainy, it's cold, the sun goes down before you get off work most of the time. So like
Mm-hmm.
if you go in early enough, you're driving in the dark both ways, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's just that time of the year, holidays, you feel pressured to buy people things, and then you feel bad if you don't because you don't have
Yeah.
enough money.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's just that time of the year. It's a very joyous time of the year. There's a lot of things happening, but at the same time, you know, saying that you're thankful for certain things, may not go as far as you hope it would, especially if you're in your dark place already. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of one of those things. Like to, to all those people that are going through that, and if you are going through that and you're listening to this episode and somehow found us, and you don't know us and you're not in our inner circle that typically listens to this podcast, just know, reach out if you need something. You know what I mean? Like we may not know you or you may not know us, but feel free to reach out. We'll respond. Like,
Yeah.
even if you're a complete stranger, we'll respond, just because, it's like one of those things, like, not, you're not alone. Like people go through shit every day. No one's really excluded from that. Some people may seem that way, but they got their own internal battles and demons they got to deal with too. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we've been around the block, but in like I said, we are very, grateful and lucky to have good support systems, um just in our lives, whether that be family or friends or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be. Sometimes that just doesn't feel like it's enough, but just know that it is at
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
It's how you
Yeah.
internalize it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And I know we both go through stuff like that as well. Internalizing it um, is, yeah, very hard because, you kind of take it upon yourself where it's like, that internal voice in your head
Mhm.
that that can be more of an enemy as well, as like telling you you're not good enough, or it's telling you, you know, you can't be better, or it's telling you you're alone and lonely. And that's just how it's going to be. But the truth is, I mean, it's a fight, right? It's not the end all be all. Um, if we acknowledge, because you and I, we talked about this. We've known each other for a long time. We go through a lot of dark times together, or even on our own, and we try to support each other. But even the feeling of going through it on your own, it is a tough feeling. Um,
It
and
is.
the hardest thing to acknowledge is that, or the easiest thing to acknowledge is to give up. But the hardest thing to acknowledge is that it's a battle, right? It's not a war. It's a or it's not. It's like that saying, right? It's a battle um, within the war, right? So you're not losing the war, which you could equate that to meaning that's the end all. It's the battles. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but as long as you acknowledge that a win or a loss, especially a loss in a battle, it's not the end all of everything. You have to acknowledge that the fight is just part of life. You just got to keep fighting yourself internally, and knowing that hardships will come, but as long as you take it head on and know that as long as you keep trying, things do get better, you know. And
Yeah,
ask for help. That's the hard part, right? Is
yeah.
asking for help.
Asking for help's the hard part, obviously.
Yeah.
But to your point, I would say that just know that even though you have a perception on certain things, like the sun is always shining. Just so you know, like even during the day, during the darkest times, during the cloudy times when there's rain, the sun's still up there. It's just blocked by something else, right? You got to battle through that storm, whatever that may be, whether it's personal or just your surroundings or whatever it is. And just going through your day, even, like if there's a rainstorm, you persevere through that. You do what you
Mm-hmm.
can. But once those clouds move, that sun's there. It's always there during the day, the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Even at night, you got the moon technically and the stars and everything. If we want to go that deep, but even behind cloud coverage, that sun's up there. So like, if you can withstand those harsh elements and those beat downs of certain things, and you may lose sight of that light, but just know it's there. You got to get through those times. Whether you're battling by yourself or with others, um, the hardest part is always asking for help, and realizing, um, you know, what's happening and what you're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
how to get through that. I think, this goes into the topic of, depression and all of that stuff, and thinking that
Mm-hmm.
you're not enough. And the only way that, you can, be better is just to not be here at all, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not all, that's not the case. Some people can go through with that, but other people, I think, start the process or the action of said thing, um, and realize that they don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their epiphany moment of shit, I need help, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when people start asking for help. But it's hard when you get to that point to where you think that's the only option. And that's the thing that, if you don't fully go through with it, is like the eye opening, like, oh shit, kind of moment.
Yeah.
And we all have those oh shit moments. You know, it's part of life, whether it's,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not to that extreme. Not all of us go through that stuff, but um, there is definitely oh shit moments. And that's the hard part, is just
Yeah.
really finding a way to ask for help, because it is easier said than done. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of factors there. You may not feel worthy to ask others of help. You might feel like you're letting yourself down. It's a pride thing. And the list can go on.
Mm-hmm.
I know I was a very stubborn individual when I was younger, very prideful. Like, that's kind of how we are.
Yeah.
Innately, we're just prideful. And you don't want to ask for help necessarily, even for whatever reason, math test, life
Mm-hmm.
advice. We're not professionals in giving life advice, but that's kind of where you stand, is pride. It gets in the way
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, and stubbornness, to not ask for help on certain things.
Yeah.
Um, but that's
Yeah.
the
Just speaking from experience, that's all it is, though.
oh yeah, trust
That's
me.
all it is. Yeah.
There are certain things. There's battles that I have chosen to just not necessarily do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you
Mm-hmm.
pick your battles, right? Um, like, no, I can do that. It'll save me money. And I'm like, nah. For those that involve money, for instance, like, changing your oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a convenience factor of me paying, because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? This ain't worth my time. I'd rather just go do something else.
Yeah.
I'd rather just sit there and let someone else do it. But that's from a money aspect. But
I
um,
mean, yeah. I mean, it's similar, right? Or
it's
or
similar.
it
Yeah,
applies
it
in this
applies for
case.
sure. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. Just knowing when, and some people don't know when to ask, just because it's just in their nature not to. But
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of different factors. Obviously, one, it could just be because of your pride. It could be because you're stubborn with your pride,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be something, to like how you were raised and all of that. And culturally, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you are the oldest person in or oldest offspring, I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
of, maybe a POC, or, a family of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have a lot more responsibilities and pressure put on you.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if you're the male or the female in a family. If you're the firstborn of several kids, there is a pressure that is on you that a lot of people may not understand. There's
Mm-hmm.
also the pressure of being a middle child. You are often, the stereotype is you're forgotten about. Um, the first one is usually just a test for parents of like, how do I get through this? They're battling
Mm-hmm.
their own battles, trying to figure out how to raise this child. And as the oldest in a family, as kids and everything, there's a lot more pressure and responsibility put on you if you're not like an only child. If you're an only child, then it's different pressure. That's pressure
Yeah.
coming from all which ways. But if there's multiple, if you have siblings and stuff, the oldest will have more of the responsibility. Um, you know, that's kind of the stereotype there, especially if you're, a person of color. Like typically, depending on your culture, that could be even stronger. um Middle child's usually forgotten. That's a whole thing. That's a
Mm-hmm.
identity crisis. And then the youngest often has a syndrome of having to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Because at that
Yeah.
point, like if you're the third, fourth, fifth child, whatever it is, in line, by that point, that you're considered the last at that point, because there's a decision made like, okay, we're officially done, typically
Mm-hmm.
typically speaking very general. And you are expected to be the peak perfect child because you're the last one. You know what I mean? Like there
Mm-hmm.
is expectations to you to learn from your siblings and learn from your parents, but not make the same mistakes or fuck ups that your siblings went through and did
Yeah.
all that. So there's a pressure there,
Yeah.
to where you then obviously become like perfect in that say.
Yeah.
And if you're not perfect, then like, who are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of funny when you look at all the different, where you're at in the pecking
Yeah.
order in terms of like, your family and all of that stuff.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it runs deep. There's so many factors. I mean, we could even play the, social media card, right? If you're feeling lonely or feeling down on yourself, and then you happen to doom scroll through social media, and
Yeah.
your entire explore page is, is a bunch of, I don't know, um, like your own projection of successful people,
Hmm.
that you're not, and so that puts you down. But you like we kind of bring it right back again. Just got to continue the fight, and know that um sometimes your eyes, lies to you, right?
Yeah.
um
I think too, from like just not even a social media, just media in general, just like
yeah.
the way that we've been painted in a way.
Yep.
That's the best word I can think of at the moment, because that's how it is, right? Is like
Yeah.
the how we're painted, in an image, right? So like
Right.
the acceptable image of what it means to be a woman, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
that's what like we were fed growing up. That's what our parents were fed. Like, well, even going further back at the boomers, like women, you know, they had a job. Men had
Yeah.
a job. That was
Yeah.
their siloed. Then as we got into like, our generation, or even like some of our parents' generation, as they started going away from that boomer expectation,
Hmm.
um, equal paying jobs became a thing, doing all of those things. And then it
Hmm.
became about looks, right? Like to be a man, you have to look like this. You're either going
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
like, you know, morbidly obese, because that's what a man is. Like they eat and drink beer all the time, or you're like that sex figure type of guy,
Yeah.
model, where you're just like ripped bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Um, but there was really only one option for obviously the women. It's like you have to look a certain way,
Hmm.
otherwise, like, what are you, like, you're not pretty kind of thing.
Hmm.
So there was that. So that was just and I know we're digressing here a little bit, but that's how culture and media and everything painted a picture for us. And now we're kind of much more diverse in
Hmm.
that, but there's still that thing of, it's still out there.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
perfect image
Yep.
in all of that for those that are listening.
Yeah.
Perfect
The,
in quotations.
yeah. I mean, the hard part is finding what's good for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's in anything. That applies to everything. Your looks, your success, um you got to find your own measurement. and
Yeah. You got to
and
define your
yeah.
success. You got to define your comfort and all that stuff.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. Like, people are asked to change for
Hmm.
numerous reasons, but you know, today's generation is not, they're not just going to conform to whatever it is that's asked of them. They will
Yeah.
do certain things, but they're not just going to, on a whim, conform to what the status quo was, right? And
Yeah.
that's where we get into this part of challenging the status quo. It's not just like you're told, essentially, but
Hmm.
now, it's like you have to find that comfortable
Hmm.
spot. And that's why, like, you see a lot of positions now, um to where, like, people figure it out real quick, like, this isn't for me, and then they leave, and whatever it might be, for jobs, for instance,
Hmm.
obviously. But like, for other things, like, I say jobs and work in your career, just because, like, that's kind of like, you're expected to do this, you're expected
Hmm.
to dress a certain way, you're expected to act a certain way, um and that kind of falls into it, right? So that's the hard part. You got to find what's comfortable
Yeah.
for you, and what works for you as well. Like, there's some times where you got to sacrifice that a little bit just to get your foot in the door, at
Hmm.
a lot of things in life. But, ultimately, like, if you can find something
Hmm.
that suits you and talks to your passions,
Yeah.
then go that way. It's also hard with the economy the way it is right now, for anyone who's trying to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
like, obviously a lot of the things that people love to do, um, they can't necessarily do it for a living, and the cost
Hmm.
of living these days is ridiculous.
Yep.
Just because minimum wages and salaries, they don't
Yeah.
jump
Just
at the
things.
same time.
Yeah.
Um, they don't go hand in hand. Some inflation will go up in one side and not necessarily be reflected on the other. So
Hmm.
that's kind of the struggle, obviously,
Hmm.
of today's society, is just seeing that cost of living versus your salary and what you're bringing in
Yeah.
income. It doesn't match up, and
Yep.
that's why it's hard. Because I saw this stat, just because we're going on like random tangents. I saw this stat where, it was like, if you're paying this much in rent, you can afford this is in a mortgage. And, like, for instance, I think $2,500, like, if you pay, which
Hmm.
is pretty standard nowadays, honestly,
Hmm.
for rent.
Hmm.
Even for like one bedroom or studios, depending where you're at.
Right.
You're San Francisco, you're looking maybe at a 6,000 square, $6,000,
Jeez.
whatever.
Yeah.
I just use that as an example. New York, for
Yeah.
instance, $5,000 for a studio apartment that's 200 square feet. Ridiculous. Like, their whole apartment's the size of this room that I'm in.
Yeah.
Just crazy. But I digress. Honestly, don't even remember what my point was, but no,
Yeah.
no, I remember now. So the stat was like, and I don't know how they calculated this, but based off of mortgages and percentages and all that stuff. But if you're paying $2,500 in rent, and I don't know how general this was, they said you could afford the mortgage of a house that's worth $430,000.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is finding the house
Yeah.
in that range of
Yeah.
$430,000, because at that point it's like, okay, where am I living?
Yeah.
What part is this? Is it safe?
Yeah.
What like what am I looking at? What state do I have to move in, or move to rather, and live in to even find that? And then
Yeah.
is my income going to even match that to where I'm at now? And I can say, like, if I'm moving to, say, for instance, I don't know, throwing this out there, Alabama, I am not going to get the same amount of money in my salary for the exact same role that I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
that I'm getting now in Alabama. There's no way.
No.
You
No.
know what I mean? The minimum wage is lower. And for me to go move to there and be like, oh, yeah, I can get a house here for that much. One, what part of Alabama are you in?
Yeah.
And two, yeah, my job's not going to translate over there to the same income that I have now, just because minimum wage is lower.
Mm-hmm.
Cost of living is probably lower, but high for that area. So
Right.
it's kind of like one of those things. If you could give me a California type of salary in a state like that, then sure, I'll consider it.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
just not the reality of it. Obviously,
Mhm.
that's kind of part of life, right? So
Yeah. That article, man, needs to read the room.
I that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like I read that and I was like, oh my God. I was like,
Yeah.
let's be realistic here. Where are you gonna find a house like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the people that are gonna attack us in the comments or whatever it might be, of like, well, back in our day, we're talking Gen X and the boomers, like, well, I
Yeah.
bought our house for like $15,000. I'm like, well, guess what? That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah. Read the
You can
room.
rub that in our face all you want, but let's be
Yeah.
honest, that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I wish it was, but
Yeah.
um, but then our wages would be extremely smaller than they are now. So,
Mm-hmm.
anyways, I digress.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I mean, to kind of wrap it up, keep it short and sweet. I think we got a little bit off our chest, which is needed because sometimes, I I have a hard time with this sometimes too, where, you know, you go through something and you try to internalize it and just bottle it up,
oh
hoping
yeah,
that it would just go away or hoping that you'll figure it out. Um, but there's, the hardest thing to do next to asking for help is to admit that we're hurting or admit that something is wrong. So kind of tie it all up. Usually I don't do final words, that I usually leave it to you, Todd, but for our sake, my final thoughts, you still have your chance. I'm not taking your spotlight away,
no, no, no,
or
no,
your
no,
job
by all
away.
means,
But
by all means.
my final thoughts is like, hey man, um, to let take something off your shoulders. Now we're talking figuratively
Yeah,
and off your chest, you know, that thing that you're bottling up that's weighing you down. Even if you do figure it out, right? Um, but to not let it off your chest, off your shoulders, um, there'll always be a chip there, right? And when a similar weight, again, figuratively, or issue comes around again, that chip is just going to widen in your armor, right? But the hardest thing to admit is to let it go, admit what's hurting you, or talk it through with someone you love and trust. Even if they don't have a solution, the idea is not to burden them. It's just to I mean, if they have a solution, great. But overall, the idea is just to vocalize and get something off your chest, off your shoulders. Because when it comes around next time, it's not going to be worse because the chip's not going to be there that left that crack in you. But
mhm.
you'll be stronger to carry that load next time because you know what to do with it again. Um, you might not it might be something tougher, but at least by you vocalizing it, getting off your chest, you don't have to carry that weight. Um, so, um, so I'll leave that with the final thoughts. No matter what we're going through, you know, talk it out, even if it doesn't go anywhere, even if it doesn't feel like it does anything. Um, it's just part of the fight. It's just another weapon that we have, and that weapon is just to let it off, get it off our shoulders, get it off our chest, and give ourselves more and more of a fighting chance for the fight to come. So that's my final thoughts. Before we wrap it up, you get what's your final thoughts?
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's, just find an outlet that's, positive, right? Obviously there's going to be negative outlets too. I don't recommend punching a wall. I've done that plenty
mhm,
in my youth.
mhm.
I mean, that's only going to hurt you more, right?
Yeah,
Not only are you hurting internally, but you're now hurting because you potentially broke your finger.
yeah,
Um, but no, I mean, finding outlets like talking is a huge one, because getting it off your chest, putting it out there, I think is, obviously half the battle, because, we all go through our struggles, we all go through our battles, whatever it might be. But just getting it out there in the universe, um, there's usually someone that can either talk you off a ledge, metaphorically, of course, or just kind of help and be that listening factor there. And sometimes that's, as us just talking to each other, we will often just let each other talk, right? We don't necessarily
mhm,
have to jump in. And this is where a lot of people who might be put into this position, right, of wanting to help or whatever it is, listening is helping, right? Active listening is,
yeah,
people talk about active listening in like workplace or whatever it might be. But I think just practicing listening and not immediately jumping to responding. And I think that's something that's very important, to anyone who's listening to this part too, is when you're talking or you're listening, you know, with someone, like between us, when we throw stuff out there, we need to get something off our chest, like we sit there, we listen, because that's all that person sometimes needs, is just listening. They don't need advice necessarily, right?
yep,
Like, as much as it is in our nature to just respond with advice, or like, have you considered this, or like, I totally get that. Like, if you don't get it, don't say I get that, right? You know what I mean? So like, there's things that you can say that can actually hurt them more.
mhm,
So listen, if you are part of that conversation, if you're just putting it out there into the universe just to say it, get it off your chest, then do that. Journaling, if you folks that journal, I know I don't want to exclude that. That is a good way to sometimes get those feelings out. Just put them in a
mhm,
journal, because sometimes it's nice to write it down, because it could be like you're elated and you want to put it down. You're angered, you want to put it down. Something
mhm,
bothered you, put it down. And that's just a creative outlet for a lot of people, because then, at times, like, you don't necessarily have to go back and look at it. Some methods are like, if you're angry or you're mad or you're sad, you write it down, you get it out of your system, you write it down on the piece of paper, throw it away after, you know what I mean? You don't have to go back and reflect on it if you don't want to. You can if you want, if that's what works for you, keep it in a journal.
mhm,
Just go back and look at it when you're at a happier time, and just be like, man, I can't believe I was at that point. Um, or if it's just one of those things, you had a shit day, a lot of people will say, leave it at the door before you come in, meditate, do whatever you need to do to cleanse your body, your soul, to get that out of there. If that also means you just write it down on a piece of paper, and after you're done, you look at it, crumple it up and throw it in the trash, or throw it in a fire pit, or whatever it might be. If that's your way of doing it, then do it. You know what I mean? So, um, that's just kind of where my final thoughts, anyways, is just ask for help, get it out there, but like, also just find ways that you can help yourself, not necessarily just bottle it up inside and don't say anything. Um, Speaking is saying something, writing is saying something, doing something to get it out.
mhm,
Some people play video games or whatever it might be, but just getting it out is honestly the most part of that battle. 90% of the battle is doing that.
mhm,
Uh, and to your point, yeah, just like, you let it kind of build inside, like, you're gonna have cracks in your armor. It's
mhm,
like, look at rocks or anything like that. Rocks are, I think one of the biggest metaphors is just like watching like the science videos, right? When people are like, oh, this is a mountain. There's no way that this would, this is a mountain. It's immovable.
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
Yeah.
if there's a crack in there, water gets in, nature gets in, it starts eroding. It breaks down from the inside. And
Yep.
you don't believe it? Watch any video with like people using sand as an example, or just a rock or whatever it might be. Like, how do you think the Grand Canyon got there? You know what I mean? Like, those are rocks. Like, those are pretty strong objects in our world. It got carved out by water. Water is always going to be those things. And I think there's a lot of things out there that, are going to break you down and do all that. And repairing yourself is part of the battle. Recovery is part of the battle. Even in working out or anything, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to get injured. You can go do a 10-mile run, but if you don't take the proper, steps to actively recover, stretch, massage your muscles, do all that, you could go out the next day and try to do the same thing and hurt yourself because you didn't take care of your body. And that's really what it's about. It's just taking care of yourself, all of those things. Even though we all drive around with a crack in our windshield or a chip in our windshield that could potentially just crack the entire thing. Yes, we're all hypocrites in that way, but get it fixed and, then you're at full strength. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my closing thought on it is just that. I think it's just find a creative outlet and a positive outlet. Don't let anger or hatred or anything consume you as much as we let it sometimes. Find a way to balance it, right? As much as we like to say like balancing and finding a way to balance things. And obviously we don't want to be at that point, but we have to be, right? Anytime you use the word balance, it means that you're trying to balance two things. And obviously you want to get to a point where you don't have to balance anything and everything is just at an equilibrium. But easier said than done in a lot of cases, but just find a good way to express yourself. And, that's half the battle. Anyways, enough rambling.
Thanks,
Yapping. We just yapping at this point.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. And I hope others get to yap and get stuff off their chest too. Just like we've shown, sometimes rambling about anything and anything is all part of the process as well to heal and to be better and stronger for our future selves. So I'm gonna end it here, and it's like we like to end. This is we like to end with our favorite saying, but more and more this hits harder this time around and again. But keep supporting one another, keep talking with each other, keep thinking together, keep growing together, and being strong for each other. And we'll see y'all next time. Have a good night.